Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 11th weekly segment. We're going to start with a quick look at Ukraine. The only major movement in the front right now is around Bakhmut, but it is very difficult to get accurate, up-to-date information on what's happening on the ground there, so I don't want to comment on that too much. Overall, there isn't much military news to comment on, so I want to pivot to politics. First of all, Putin is reportedly going to cancel his address to the Federal Assembly. Now, legally, he does have to give this address this year, according to the Constitution, and his spokesman, Peskov, has denied that it is being cancelled, but this was reported by a government-owned Russian news agency. So, as of right now, I'm taking this fairly seriously, because we've seen recently since the start of the war that the Russian state media have become increasingly cautious and worried about misstepping. So it doesn't seem very likely to me that they'd report something like this just because I feel like they're fairly sure about it. Putin is also not doing his major, usually 3-4 hour press conference this year. That's a direct line with Vladimir Putin. That has been officially confirmed to be cancelled also by Peskov. So both Putin and the Russian state are looking increasingly insecure as time goes on. I don't think Putin is reconsidering the war, but I think he is considering some sort of clampdown and worrying more about internal security. And let's take a look at why. Putting aside the military failures that we've seen, the Russian economy is currently struggling. The central bank has just announced that there is a labor shortage, mostly as a result of the mobilization. It's also worth noting that support for the war is going down. It's not low by any means, and it's still a huge majority of the population that is in support of the war, but it is going down, which is usually not a good sign. Putin's personal approval ratings do remain high, though. At latest poll, they were at 79%, which is on the high end of middle for him. I believe the lowest prior to the Crimea annexation was around 61%. And it's important to note that a change in public mood towards the war won't actually dictate how Putin conducts it. It will simply likely lead to a crackdown on internal dissent and an increasingly paranoid government. Putin will not see Russian opposition as a response to the war, because he does not, and this is an important distinction, Putin does not believe in opposition. He does not believe that there is a friendly Russian, pro-Russian opposition inside the country. Everyone who is against him is either an external enemy or a traitor, most likely in service of an external enemy. And you could see this back in 2012, 2014, when there were the big protests against Putin after the Duma election. You could see that he blamed everything, all of these protests, not on the possibility that people could be concerned by the reported fraud, ballot stuffing, all of that, but on the interference of the US State Department, specifically Hillary Clinton. And there is, of course, a strategic lens to this, but you do notice that when Putin is looking to ban companies, to target companies for their anti-regime activities, he brands them as foreign agents. There's NGOs sometimes, often, that have absolutely nothing to do with foreign countries, and he brands them as foreign agents. Because if they are opposed to him, who is the personification of Russia as a country, then they are opposed to Russia, and so they must be in service of Russia's enemies. So a change in public opinion will not prompt a change in the state of the war. Putin is committed, he believes he is doing what's right, and he is not going to change that based on what the people think. He's made some concessions to the nationalist faction with the initial terror bombings on Ukraine, and the infrastructure bombings that we're seeing now. I want to separate those two things. After the Kerch Bridge, there were the terror bombings that served no military or war purpose, but were simply meant to inflict fear and pain on the civilian population. And now we are seeing infrastructure bombings, which are similarly cruel, but they do have a decisive military purpose, even if that's unlikely to work. And to some degree, both of these are concessions to the nationalist faction. And it's dangerous to give up a degree of control like that and to make these concessions to pressure. But Putin, if he's willing to do that for the nationalists, he will not for the liberals. And for the most part, the nationalists do currently support him. and it's probably because they don't have much of another option right now. The figureheads right now do not seem to be expressing an interest in leadership. They don't seem to be presenting themselves as not even as opposition, but as an alternative to Putin. People like Girk and Dugin are not putting themselves in that role right now. So like I said last time, we're going to want to watch the run-up to the 2024 presidential election. We want to look at who is going to be allowed to run and whether there will be an opposition-controlled opposition candidate. Just one more thing before we wrap up for today. The Economist has done an interview with Ukraine's commander-in-chief. The full interview hasn't been released yet, and I might comment on it once it has, depending on how much there is worth talking about. But one of the key takeaways that's been released already is that they expect another Russian push from Belarus towards Kiev sometime early next year. This has been our 11th weekly segment, and thank you for listening.